The other thing I would like to go into this morning is sorrow. We have talked about authority. We have talked over together about the desire for security, the nature and structure of authority. We talked about fear, pleasure, love, and if we may, we also should talk over together this enormous problem of suffering. I hope you're not tired, are you? We're going to have an insight into suffering. There is not only a particular human being with his suffering, there is the suffering of the world. Right? There is suffering through poverty, ignorance. There is suffering brought about through death. There is suffering out of great pity. There is suffering when you see animals tortured, killed, maimed. There is suffering when there is war. Thousands of mothers and sisters and wives and people, girls, crying their heart out. Because we have accepted war as I don't know why we have accepted it, but you have. So wars have brought about immense suffering. The totalitarian, the authoritarian dictators have brought immense suffering. Concentration camps, one may not have been in them, but you see it. You know it is happening, and you're suffering. So there are these various kinds of suffering, not only personal, but the suffering of whole of humanity. You are aware of it, aren't you? And we have accepted it. We say love is part of suffering. When you love somebody, it brings about suffering. Right? So we are going to question together whether it is possible to be free of all suffering. And when there is this freedom from suffering in the consciousness of each human being who are listening here, then that freedom from suffering brings about a transformation in consciousness, and therefore that consciousness, that radical change in consciousness affects the whole of mankind's suffering. Do you understand? That is part of compassion. Not saying, I suffer, my God, my God, my God, why do I suffer? Why should I suffer? And from that suffering, act neurotically and try to escape from that suffering through various forms of religious, intellectual, social work and so on. Escape from it. So we are saying, is it possible for every human being here to be free of this enormous burden of suffering? Where there is suffering, you cannot possibly love. That is a truth, a law. When you love somebody and he does something which you, or she does something which you totally disapprove and you suffer, it shows that you don't love. Right? You understand? I am not laying down the law, but see the truth of it. How can I suffer when my wife, if I have a wife or a girl, who throws me away and goes after somebody else? You understand? And we suffer from that. We get angry, jealous, envious, hateful. And at the same time we say, I love my wife or my girl. I say such love is not love. Right? So is it possible not to suffer and yet have immense love, the flowering of it? So we're going to find out what suffering is. There is physical suffering, right? Headaches, operations, malformed bodies, accidents that bring about amputation or some form of ugly deformity. There is suffering from the various unfulfilled desires. I hope you're following all this. There is suffering from the person, from the loss of a person whom you think you love. After all, what is the structure and the nature and the essence of suffering? You understand? The essence of it, not the various forms of it. What's the essence of suffering? I'm asking myself for the first time. I'm going to find out. Together we're going to find out. Is it not the total expression at that moment of complete self-centered existence? What do you say? It is the essence of the me. The essence of the ego, the person, the limited, enclosed, resisting existence which you call the me, the form, the name, all that. When there is an incident that demands investigation and understanding and insight, that very incident brings about the awakening of the me, the essence. And that I call suffering. What do you say? Huh? If there was no me, would you suffer? You would help, you would do all kinds of things, but you wouldn't suffer. So, suffering then is the expression of the me, which includes self-pity, loneliness, trying to escape, trying to be with the other who is gone. All that's implied, which is the very me, which is the past. The image of the past, which is me. The knowledge, the remembrance of the past, which is me. So, what relationship has suffering, the essence of the me, to love? Please think it out. Let's think it out together. We're asking, is there any relationship between love and suffering? Is love put together by thought, whereas the me is put together by thought? Oh, come on, I see something. Are we following? Is love put together by thought? The experience, the memories, the remembrances, the pain, the delight, the pleasures, and the pursuit of pleasure, sexual or otherwise, the pleasures of possession, possessing somebody, and the somebody liking being possessed. All that is the structure of thought, which we've gone into. And the me, with its name, with its form, the essence of me is the nature and structure put together by thought. Obviously. So what is the relationship between love and suffering? If love is not put together by thought, please go into this, put your heart into this. If love is not put together by thought, then suffering has no relationship to it. Therefore action from love is different from action from suffering. Get it? Why am I so intense about all this? Why aren't you so intense? So, to have an insight, please follow this, to have an insight into suffering, which means what place has thought in relationship to love and in relationship to suffering. Right? To have an insight into it, which means you are neither escaping, wanting comfort, frightened to be lonely, isolate. Therefore, your mind is free. Therefore, that which is free is empty. And therefore, that empty, if you have that emptiness, and that which means freedom, you have an insight into suffering. Therefore, suffering, as the me disappears, there is immediate action, because that is so. So your action then is from love, not from suffering. You get what I'm talking? Bene, signora. Then one discovers that action from suffering is a continued action of the me modified, and therefore constant conflict. Right? You can see the logic of it all, reason for it. So, it is possible to love and without a shadow of suffering. And what is the action of compassion? You understand? If love is not the result of thought, thought which is the response of memory, stored up in the brain as knowledge and experience, that thought is not love, right? And our action is based on thought. Now, I must do this, this is my motive, it's based on the movement and the modification of thought. When thought is not love, then what is the action of compassion? Love. We can say then from there, what is the action of an insight out of which there is intelligence? We are saying compassion is intelligence. What is the action of intelligence? Which is not the outcome of thought, right? What is the action of intelligence? Can you ask such a question? If you have intelligence, it is operating, it is functioning, it's acting. But to say, what is the action of intelligence? You want the response, you want thought to be satisfied. Right? You see what I mean? Look, when you say, what is the action of compassion? Who is asking it? Is it not thought? Is it not the me that say, if I could have this compassion, I will act differently? Therefore, it's still, when you put that question, you are still thinking in terms of thought. But you have an insight into thought, then thought has its right place, and intelligence and acts. Have you got it for this morning? Is that enough for this morning? It's enough for me, for the speaker. So see, sirs, what's implied in all this? How important it is that there should be a radical revolution, psychological revolution. Because no politics, no government, no Lenin, Marx, nobody is going to solve any of our problems. The human problem, from which every misery comes, from a human being who is functioning, living, operating, acting on thought. And when you have an insight into thought, then you have also an insight into the nature and the beauty of love, and from the action from that. So, there's a nice story of a preacher, a teacher. Perhaps some of you have heard it. From me, if you have heard it, please forgive me for repeating it. There was a teacher and his disciples. Every morning, he used to talk to the disciple, give a sermon. And one morning, he gets on the rostrum, on the pedestal, and as it was just about to begin, a bird comes in and sits on the windowsill and begins to sing. And the preacher stops talking and listens to the bird, the beauty of the sound, the blue sky, and the quietness of that song. And the bird flies away. So he turns to his disciples and says, "The morning sermon is over."